Which religion advanced Western civilization more, Christianity or Islam?
Well, if you listen to cringy TikTok atheists, the answer is neither. But if you read historians of science, the answer is very clear. It's Christianity.
The answer is Islam, and it's not even a question.
And what's your source for that?
You might be thinking that Europe made all of these advancements and they were Christian nations. And it's true, Europe was Christian and they made all of these scientific advancements, but they did that in spite of the church.
This is demonstrably false. Historians today note that Christianity was crucial for the development of science. James Hannum says even Christian theology turned out to be uniquely suited to encouraging the study of the natural world, which was believed to be God's creation. David Hutchins and James Ungariano said, "For an actual fact, no other body of thought has ever been of greater benefit to scientific thinking than the central tenets of traditional Christianity have in the whole of human history." Noah J. Efron said, "Generations of historians and sociologists have discovered many ways in which Christians, Christian beliefs, and Christian institutions played crucial roles in fashioning the tenets, methods, and institutions of what in time became modern science. They found that some forms of Christianity provided the motivation to study nature systematically." Now, there is no doubt that Islam contributed to the growth of science, but not as much as Christianity has. And that's because Islam never allowed science, or natural philosophy, to grow into its own institution, because they didn't have a pronounced distinction between church and state, unlike in the West, as the historian Edward Grant says. The Christian church did acknowledge and accept the separation of church and state, which allowed for the development of a secularly oriented natural philosophy. In medieval Islam, by contrast, truly secular government was absent, and church and state were one. The function of the state was to guarantee the well-being of the Muslim religion, so that all who live within the state could be good, practicing Muslims. Science is essentially a secular activity. Where religion is strong, as in the case with Islam, it is very likely to dominate secular activities like science, unless the activity is recognized as independent, is protected by a secular state, or is favorably regarded by religious authorities. In medieval Islam, none of these conditions were met, whereas in late medieval Latin Christendom, the third condition was clearly in effect, because the church looked with favor on science. Secular authorities also adopted a beneficial approach toward it. They had no reason to oppose science and natural philosophy. Indeed, they found many occasions to favor the disciplines. The Geo-Hooser is just simply wrong here. Christianity is the greatest pillar of modern science. Without it, science would not be what it is today.
Galileo, Dante, Marco Polo, Giordano Bruno were all great thinkers, scientists, and mathematicians who were imprisoned or executed by the church because their teachings went against dogma.
This is nothing more than the conflict thesis, a 19th century myth rejected by historians of science today. Copernicus himself was ordained and was never opposed by the church. Galileo could not prove his heliocentric case scientifically, but half of the Vatican supported him regardless of that fact. Bruno got into trouble for his theology, not for his science. The Catholics liked Newton's theories, for he explicitly wrote that they came from and required God. Darwin's work was admired by just as many believers as despised it. The Catholic Church incidentally favored evolution. Einstein's deductions faced no religious opposition at all. Instead, his ideas were embraced by the Catholic priest George Lemaitre, who then used them to devise the Big Bang model of the universe. The Catholic Church was not a perfect institution, but it never persecuted anyone for practicing science. This is a myth of the conflict thesis.
Nicholas Copernicus did not allow his work to be published until after he passed away.
And not because he was afraid of the church, but because he was afraid of being mocked by other scientists or natural philosophers of the day. People don't realize this, but at the time, the science was on the church's side. Copernicus said the planets went around the sun in perfect circles. There was no physics to explain how that could happen. But when elliptical models could be developed from the work of Newton or Kepler, the church accepted it with ease, because the science was there to support it. The science has never supported a Copernican model.
Most of the population was illiterate, and any teachings and breakthrough that remotely contradicted what the clergy was saying was shut down.
Again, this is nothing more than the conflict thesis. The church helped science grow, it didn't hinder it. And yes, illiteracy was widespread across the globe in the Middle Ages, but the historian Loris Chevalier says, The church and the royal institutions strove to transmit and teach to as many people as possible. Monastic schools were free. You can also look up the monk Alcuin, who advanced literacy across France. The reason people are so educated today has a lot to do with Christianity. The GeoHooser has some interesting videos on economics and geopolitics, so it's sad that he's pushing this debunk myth known as the conflict thesis. I hope he corrects himself in a future video.